Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. In this training session, we will be covering the IIMUN rules of procedure, and we'll proceed. We'll just wait for a while till more people join in.
Please come in.
Begin. We will be starting this session in a while, till a couple of people more join in. I would like you all to just mark your presence by stating your institute's name, and so that we can begin. Okay, so let's just start with this session. Firstly, I'll briefly tell you what this session will be covering. This session will be covering the Indian International Model United Nations Rules of Procedure, and the ROP will be covered briefly, wherein you will be taught as to how this ROP is utilized in a committee session. So the first thing, that's the crucial thing whenever any committee proceeds, is something that we require, and that thing is called quorum. Now, quorum is the minimum number of people that need to be present in order for council to begin its proceedings. I repeat, quorum is the minimum number of people that have to be present for a council to begin its proceeding. For example, if the number of members inside the council are 100, then the quorum, that is 1/5 of the committee strength, needs to be present. So if you have 100 members in total, then at least 20 people need to be present so that the council can begin with its proceedings. Now, as soon as the quorum is achieved, we move on to deciding as to what the council will discuss. Now, when deciding this, we have something called setting of the agenda. What this means is, now since the quorum is set, whatever the council has on its plate or the matter right now, that the council will first decide. Now, if you are in United Nations Security Council, then the agenda that you are going to be discussing, that is, for example, let's say reforms in Security Council, then you will be setting that agenda. Now, how to set the agenda, I will explain it further. But remember, setting of an agenda basically means that you want to begin or set the session agenda to be discussed for the proceedings of the session. Now, setting of the agenda happens. Firstly, the chairperson will ask, are there any points or motions on the floor? And any of the delegates can raise his placards, and using the same, the delegates can say motion to set the agenda to, let's say, reforms in the Security Council. After this, the chairperson will again ask, are there any oppositions? So if there's none, then the agenda is set. However, if there's any oppositions, then we have completely different procedure. But I will repeat whatever we've covered up till now once again so that we are clear before we proceed. That is, firstly, the chairperson will ask, are there any points or motions on the floor, wherein any of the delegate can raise a motion for raising the agenda to, for example, let's say reforms in Security Council. and chairperson will then ask, are there any oppositions? If none, then the agenda is set. However, if there is any opposition, then we have one for and one against the topic area, wherein both the speakers come and speak for and against, and we then resolve the issue. Now let's say after this also, when we have a voting wherein the motion does not pass and the committee does not want to go ahead with this discussion of the agenda, then the second agenda is automatically taken into consideration and the agenda is set. So after setting of the agenda, we have now set in the committee as to what we will be proceeding further with. And then as soon as the agenda is set, automatically by default the speakers list opens. What is a speakers list? Speakers list, it's a format in the discussion wherein the delegates give their general stand on the agenda and they discuss about the topic area generally. Now, speakers list doesn't have to be opened by anyone. It opens by default as soon as the agenda is set, and it remains open for the entire discussion of the agenda. So there are a couple of specifications about the speakers list, and these specifications are as follows. The speakers list follows the alphabetical order, and also every delegate gets maximum 90 seconds to speak. So speakers list in 90 seconds you have to speak for and give. These are speakers list is also generally called the opening speeches, wherein you are supposed to give your stand on the agenda and your country's stand. Now in speakers list there's something that's provided, but before we move into that, I will repeat these speakers list once again very briefly. That is, speakers list opens by default. It always moves in alphabetical order, and also the time set by default is 90 seconds, and all the delegates have to speak once, and speakers list never gets exhausted. Even if all the speakers have spoken once, then this speakers list begins from starting again, and speakers list remains open for the entire time the agenda is discussed. Next, moving on, in speakers list we have one provision wherein, to make sure that it's not just a monotonous speech given by a delegate, but there's a dialogue inside the council, we have a provision of something called the yields. So in speakers list, after every speech of every delegate, there are 3 yields that the delegates can utilize, and these yields are compulsory. Now, before moving on to those 3 types of yields, do note that yields are compulsory, and all the delegates utilize these yields in order to engage in a dialogue and to clarify anything regarding the speech that the delegate has mentioned. So there are 3 types of yields, as I said before, and these 3 types of yields are: firstly, we have yield to another delegate. What is yield to another delegate? Now, in yield to another delegate, let's say a delegate has spoken for 60 seconds out of the 90 seconds that the time is allotted to, then the delegate has 30 seconds remaining. So the delegate can utilize this time to give it to another delegate so that another delegate can clarify his opinion. After that, the delegate has another 2 types of yields, that is yield to question. In yield to question, the delegate has an opportunity to directly ask a question to the speaker who's spoken about his or her speech and clarify all the queries. This is the second type of yield. The third type of yield that we have is something called yield to comments. Now, yield to comments basically means that the committee gets an opportunity to give or share their viewpoints with the delegate about his or her speech, and the comments, each one lasts for a maximum of 30 seconds. So I'll repeat all the 3 yields once again, but there are a couple of things that you have to keep in mind. Let's say if you've spoken for 70 seconds, then you have all the 3 yields. But the yield to another delegate is valid only if you have more than 50 seconds at your disposal. I'm repeating, the yield to another delegate is available only if you have more than 15 seconds at your disposal. If you don't have, even if you've finished all the 90 seconds, then you have to yield either the question or comment, since yields are compulsory. So I'll repeat all the three once again. The first yield that we have is yield to another delegate, wherein another delegate gets an opportunity to say his or her stand to the council. And yield to another delegate can only be utilized if you have at least 15 seconds at your disposal, as I said before. Next yield we have is yield to questions. Now, in yield to questions, the council can ask the delegate up to 2 questions to clarify any of the queries that they have. The third yield that we have is yield to comment. Yield to comment, minimum 30 seconds or maximum 30 seconds are there so that the delegates can comment or give their opinion on the delegate speech. Now, moving on, after yields and the speakers list, we have a very formal form of debate and a very informal form of debate. The formal form of debate is called the moderated caucus, and the informal form of debate is called unmoderated caucus. So, firstly, we'll discuss what is a moderated caucus, and then we will discuss about what is an unmoderated caucus. So, a moderated caucus, as I said before, is a very formal form of debate. It has a particular total speaker's time and an individual speaker's time. Also, so for example, let's say in a moderated caucus, the best analogy that we can take here is that of a pizza or a cake, wherein you cannot have the entire pizza or a cake at a go, and you need to divide the same into smaller parts. So the entire agenda cannot be discussed as a whole inside the council. So we take the subparts of the agenda and then we discuss it. So in a moderated caucus, we take a subpart. For example, we cut the pizza into one piece and then we have it. So the moderated caucus is taken in a similar manner on a subpart. For example, we have the agenda as curing or finding solutions or ways to deal with the Ebola virus. So you can have a probable moderated caucus such as what are the major points to keep in mind while finding a cure for Ebola virus, or the epidemic caused due to the Ebola virus. Such moderated caucus subtopics can be raised and they are discussed in a moderated caucus.
How many agendas per committee?
Okay, so there will be now moving on, in a moderated caucus there are a couple of specifications. For example, the maximum time allowed for a moderated caucus is 15 minutes and delegates cannot extend for more than that, and the maximum time allowed per speaker is 1 minute. And okay, so I'll repeat once again, in moderated caucus the maximum time per speaker is 15 minutes and the individual maximum time is 1 minute. I'll explain it further. That is, the entire subtopic that is being discussed can be discussed for no more than 15 minutes at a go in a moderated caucus, and every speaker can speak for no more than 1 minute. The way this motion will be raised is this: motion to raise a moderated caucus on, let's say, should the G4 members be given the veto power for time being 8 minutes, total time being 8 minutes, and individual speaking time 1 minute. Now, in this we can see the total time that we have raised is 8 minutes and individual speaking time is 1 minute. Now, you can have any combination as such, but the total time, remember, cannot be extended for anything more than 15 minutes. Now, if there are more people who are willing to discuss the same, or who are willing to speak in the moderated caucus, then a similar moderated caucus can be raised after the same moderated caucus has elapsed. So, just to summarize about the moderated caucus once again, moderated caucus is a very formal debate wherein we have to set the entire time for the discussion, and the maximum time allowed is 15 minutes, and the maximum time allowed for per speaker is 1 minute. Maximum time allowed is 1 minute. So then we have 15 minutes, 1 minute, and post that moderated caucus can be extended, and it can also be, after that it can also be raised again in case there are more people who are willing to speak. So that is about the formal debate. Now before we move on to informal debate, if you have any queries you can just post them and we will answer them. I hope everyone's clear with everything that's covered up till now. So just like the formal debate, we have the informal debate called the unmoderated caucus. Now, after every proper discussion on a subpart, you need to have something by which you are preparing the paperwork. Now, the paperwork ideally is prepared in an unmoderated caucus, or the unmoderated caucus can also be utilized for something known as lobbying. Now, an unmoderated caucus is an informal debate wherein you can roam around the council, you can talk to delegates, and you can convince them and share your viewpoints with them. So, moderated caucus has two main purposes that it's raised for. The first purpose is for lobbying. As I said, in lobbying, you go around the council, you talk to other countries, and you share your viewpoints with them and find a common ground for both of them. This is one of the purposes where you lobby around and you find a common ground with the other countries. The second purpose that it's used for is something called preparation of paperwork. Now, second main reason why we use it for the preparation of paperwork is very important. Why? Because everything that's being discussed needs to be put down in a written format. Unless and until that is done, this discussion that has happened is not counted as substantial one. Although it's very important for us to put it down, because all the discussion needs to be in a written format so that a final work or guideline can be prepared for the proceeding of the agenda. So there are three types of paperwork. The first type that we have is working paper. The second one that we have is called a resolution, and the third one is declaration. I will move on to what each one of them is later on, but remember there are two main reasons why we have an unmoderated caucus. The first reason, as I said before, is lobbying. The second reason is paperwork preparation. And in paperwork, we have three different types of paperwork. The first one is working paper. The second one is called the resolution. And the third one is called declaration. So, unmoderated caucus, just like a moderated caucus, has a time limit on it. So, for the first purpose, that is lobbying, the maximum time allowed is 15 minutes. And for paperwork preparation, for example, if you are preparing a working paper, then the time allowed is different than what the time allowed is for resolution and declaration. So, for resolution and declaration, you can have a 5-minute extension. That is, the maximum time allowed is 20 minutes. But for lobbying and working paper, the maximum time allowed is 15 minutes. So, unmoderated caucus, I'll summarize it once again. There are two main purposes why you have an unmoderated caucus for. The first purpose being the lobbying, and in lobbying, you basically go around the council and you share your viewpoints with others. The second reason why we have an unmoderated caucus is because we want to prepare any of the paperwork which are mentioned, and the maximum time allowed for a lobbying and a working paper is 15 minutes, but for a resolution or declaration, a 5-minute extension, that is a maximum of 20 minutes, are allowed. I hope everyone is clear. Now before moving ahead, all these were the motions. Now there's something provided in the rules of procedure in case there is something that the delegate is wanting to clarify, or there's some deviation in the ROP that needs to be pointed out, or there's some discomfort faced by the delegate. So these can be pointed out inside the council using something called points. Now there are 4 different types of points in the IIMUN rules of procedure. Now we will move on from the most disruptive to the least disruptive point. I'll repeat all the point once. That is, firstly, we have point of personal privilege. Secondly, we have point of information. After that, we have point of order. And lastly, we have point of parliamentary inquiry. Now we will discuss all these points one by one. That is, firstly, we have point of personal privilege. Now, point of personal privilege is utilized when any delegate is feeling mental or physical discomfort inside the council. So, after point of personal privilege, I repeat, point of personal privilege is utilized when the delegate is feeling any sort of mental or physical discomfort. For example, let's say the delegate is not able to hear what the speaker is trying to speak, the speaker is not audible, or let's say it's too cold or too hot inside the council, then the same can be pointed out using the point of personal privilege. The next point is point of information. Now, point of information is something that is utilized when there is a factual inaccuracy inside the council. Now, point of information does not mean that you get an opportunity to ask a question to the delegate. It just means that the delegate has made a factual error. For example, delegate says there are only 6 continents in the world, which is factually not correct. So to point out the same error, the delegates can utilize point of information and point it out to the delegate and to the council about the same. Now, of course, there needs to be a source that needs to be provided by the delegate to show that what the delegate is saying is correct, and the acceptable sources ideally are the governmental websites or any of the sources approved by the executive board. Amnesty International, Reuters, or any other approved source which your EB agrees to. However, depending upon the case, it might change, especially when it comes to, let's say for example, the Lok Sabha, the Indian Council. So we will deal with it on case by case basis. Now, after point of information, we have something called point of order. In point of order, let's say for example, a delegate states the maximum time allowed for a moderated caucus is 18 minutes. Now, in the rules of procedure, the maximum time allowed is 15 minutes. So this is a procedural deviation that is happening inside the council. So to point it out, or to point out any other procedural deviation, we can utilize the point of order and let the council know about the same. I'll repeat once again. Point of order is utilized when there is any procedural deviations. Let's say a delegate says he wants to go ahead and speak for more than 1 minute in the moderated caucus. This is not allowed by the rules of procedure. Hence, this can be pointed out utilizing the same point, that is point of order. Lastly, we have a point called point of parliamentary inquiry. The point of parliamentary inquiry basically is utilized whenever the delegates wish to know anything about the procedure or the council from the executive board. So the point of parliamentary can be utilized when the delegate is, for example, let's say, not very clear with the rules of procedure or would like to clarify as to what's the maximum time allowed for a resolution making. So the point of a parliamentary inquiry can be utilized for the same. However, do note that out of all the 4 points, only the point of personal privilege can interrupt a speaker. All the other points cannot interrupt the speaker. But it should be noted that point of personal privilege should interrupt a speaker in a case, for example, let's say the speaker is not audible or it's something that is very urgent. The delegate should try their best to not interrupt the speaker and wait till the speaker finishes speaking, and then the delegate can raise the motion for the same. Now, all the points are clear. We've covered all the points and we've covered the formal and informal format debate. Now, moving on, we have the different types of paperwork. Now, to cover the paperwork, the first type of paperwork that we have is something called a working paper. Now, what is a working paper? Working paper, whatever, for example, we discussed a subpart in the moderated caucus. Now, whatever we've discussed, we need to put it down in a written format. And that can be done in a document called a working paper, which basically is the opinions and or the points or the solutions on the subpart of the agenda. Remember, working paper is the opinions or solutions on the subpart of the agenda, but not the entire agenda. Now, working paper, for working paper, you have no particular format as such, but working paper needs to be approved by the chair in order for the working paper to be presented inside the council. Now, let's say there are multiple working papers and there can be multiple working papers on one subpart of the agenda. For example, there are, let's say, 3 different blocks and all 3 different blocks have different ideologies. So all the blocks can come together or they can separately, individually make the working papers on the subpart of the agenda. And remember, the working paper does not have any specific format and it does not require any signatories. However, you can just, the preferred format for the working paper is as follows. You can just write the working paper number followed by the authors. Who are authors? Authors are the ones, those who ideate over the working paper, followed by points about the working paper, all the points or the thoughts that the delegates have on the subpart. That's it. Now, remember, working paper is made on a subpart and not the entire agenda. So let's say after the moderated caucus, we can have an unmoderated caucus. In the unmoderated caucus, we can either lobby or we can prepare a working paper. Now that is done. We repeat this cycle again and again, and at the end we have to make one paper which contains solution to the entire agenda. Now, why is this important? Because we have just compiled everything that we have our opinions on the subparts, but not on the entire agenda. So to have a document on the entire agenda, we have something called a resolution, which is a solution to the entire agenda. A resolution is a very formal document and it has a very specific format. And in resolution, we have authors and signatories. Who are the authors? Authors are basically the people, those who ideate and draft the resolution. And on the other hand, we have signatories, and signatories are the ones who actually who are just willing to discuss the working paper, and they may or may not agree to actually agree with the working paper or disagree with the same. Now, agree with the resolution or disagree with the resolution. Now, a resolution needs to be ratified by the executive board before it's presented or introduced on the council floor. Remember, the resolution has a very specific format, and resolution requires a minimum of one author and 3 signatories. Now let's say there are 2 or 3 different blocks, and all of them have different ideologies. So there can be multiple resolutions as well, but eventually the one which has more number of signatories will be put on the council's floor first and will be voted upon first. So I hope you're clear with what is a working paper and what is a resolution. I'll shortly cover both of them once again. A working paper is your opinions and your thoughts about one subpart of the entire agenda. And your resolution is the solution to the entire agenda. A working paper does not have any specific format and does not require any signatories. However, a resolution has a very specific format and it requires at least one author and 3 signatories to be present. So, now moving on, there are a couple of points, and these points we will cover. Firstly, there's something called amendments. What are amendments? Now let's say a resolution is already drafted and presented on the floor. So amendments are provided in the rules of procedure to make the resolution better. Amendments are not provided to change the resolution. However, do note that a couple of parts can be changed, but remember it's eventually there in the rules of procedure to make the entire resolution better than its existing ones. So what are amendments? There are 2 types of amendments. One, we have a friendly amendment, and second, we have a normal amendment. But as the example that I can give you about amendments is, we have Coca-Cola and we drink Coca-Cola. However, we do add ice to it. Now when we add ice to it, we don't actually change it, but we just make it taste better. Similarly, amendments may not change the entire resolution, and ideally they do not change the resolution, but they just make the resolution better. So there are 2 types of amendments. The first type of amendment is called the friendly amendment. The second type of amendment is called normal amendment. Now, a friendly amendment is the one wherein the people, those who draft the resolution, that is the authors, they agree to this amendment. And if they agree, then there need not be any discussion, and it does not require any voting. It is directly incorporated inside the resolution. So, friendly amendment is one type. The second type is normal amendment. Normal amendments, as you can guess, normal amendments are the ones wherein the authors do not agree to, and these are the ones which need to be discussed and introduced on the council floor to be approved. The normal amendment needs to have the simple majority via an informal vote to pass, and if it passes, then it's incorporated inside the resolution. Now, let's say at times, as I told you before, a resolution has a very specific format, and when we draft anything, we might make any linguistic errors or any typographical errors. In such a scenario, we have a provision in the rules of procedure called amendments, which is basically any grammatical errors or the deviations can be noted out, and the same changes can be made in the resolution, and this amendment does not require any kind of voting. Only chair's approval is required. Only the executive board needs to say yes, and then the amendment is incorporated. So we've covered about what a formal debate, that is a moderated caucus, is. After that, we covered what is it at moderated caucus, that is informal debate. Post that, we covered the different types of paperwork that we have, that is a working paper and a resolution. And after that, we covered amendments and amendments, which are basically just changes in the resolution that the council feels or the delegate feels. Now, there are a couple of special rules, the rules which are exciting and which are very interesting to discuss. But before we move into that, there are two different types of voting that we have. On the first hand, we have something called informal vote or informal voting. How does an informal voting go about? An informal voting ideally goes about when the delegate says, or the EB asks the council, all those in favor, and then the EB asks again, all those against. So I repeat, the informal voting has two steps. In the first step, the EB asks, all those people, those who are in favor, please raise your placards. And the EB then counts the number of delegates. After that, the EB asks all those against the motion. Then the EB will count the number of delegates. And if the minimum criteria of 51% or the simple majority is met, then the motion is passed. Now, this informal voting is utilized for most of the things that we do inside the council. This can either be the passing of a moderated caucus that you've raised, or an unmoderated caucus that you've raised, or if it's a working paper. So for all of this, we utilize this informal form of voting. On the other hand, we have a very formal form of voting. And informal form of voting, remember, it's utilized only for resolution. And it goes about in 3 different rounds. Also, there's one major difference between both the votings. That is, in informal voting, you require a simple majority, that is 50% plus 1. And in formal voting, you require a 2/3 majority, that is the special majority. Now, an example that can explain both the different types of majorities to you. Let's say you have a council of 30 delegates. Then in simple majority, you require 50% plus 1. That is only 16 delegates to support the motion for it to pass. In the special majority, you have 2/3. That is 20 delegates out of the 30 need to support it in order for that resolution to pass. Now, I will go into details about all the 3 rounds. There is multiple options. We have yes with rights. 4th, we have no with rights. 5th, we have pass. And 6th, we have abstain. I'll repeat, you have 6 options to choose from in the first round. That is yes, no, yes with rights, no with rights, pass and abstain. Now, yes and no are fairly simple. Yes basically means you support it. No basically means that you don't support it. Then you have yes with rights. Now let's say you are going against your policies in order to support the resolution that's been made. So In that case, you have to say yes with rights. With rights basically means that you are going against your present country's policies to support or go against the resolution. Now, I hope you are clear with the first four options, that is yes, no, yes with rights, and no with rights. The fifth option we have is called pass. Now, you can say pass when you are not yet clear whether you want to support the resolution or you don't want to support the resolution. And you would like to give your stand in the further part of the formal voting. Then you can say the same motion, same point. The sixth option that you have is something called abstain, wherein you don't want to give in your stand whether you support or you don't support, and you would like to be neutral. In that case, you can select the sixth option, that is abstain. That basically means that you don't want to give your stand on the matter as of now. So, this is the first round. The executive board will one by one ask all the countries present inside the council, provided they are not the observers, unless they've been given the right to vote by the EB, and the EB asks one by one and makes a note of everything that's the delegate has said in the first round. Now, provided there's at least one delegate who said a pass and at least one delegate who said with rights in the first round, we move on to second round. I repeat, provided there's at least one delegate who said a pass and another delegate who said with rights, either yes with rights or no with rights, we move on to the second round. In second round, all those delegates who said with rights will get an opportunity to justify why they've done so. They will get a minute each to justify in front of the council why they are going against the country's policies and what's the reason for them supporting this resolution. One by one, all the speakers will come and speak. Once that is done, once all the speakers who said or have justified the stand who said with rights, we will move on to the third round of formal voting. The third round of formal voting has three options. First, we have a yes. Second, we have no. Third, we have an abstain. So, all those people, those who said yes, no, or abstain in the first round, have to stick by the stand that they've given. However, all those people, those who said pass in the first round, in the third round, they will have to either say yes or in no as to whether they are supporting the resolution or they are not supporting the resolution. So, again, the executive board, one by one, will take each and every country's names and the voting will be done and the delegates will be asked whether they are supporting the resolution or they are not supporting the resolution. And after the entire list is again completed, the executive board will just count the number of people, those who said yes, and number of people, those who said no, along with number of people, those who abstained. And if the number of people, those who said yes, exceeds the special majority, that is the 2/3 majority, then the resolution is passed. Now, I hope you're clear with the formal voting. It goes on in 3 different rounds. Now, moving on, as I told you, there are a couple of very important and very exciting rules that you can utilize inside the council to your benefit for the discussion. And those rules are the ones which are special to the IIMUN rules of procedure. And these rules are as follows. First, we have a challenge. What is a challenge? A challenge is basically a bilateral talk or a multilateral forum. What this means is two countries can come in front of a council and sort out the disputes amongst each other in front of the entire council. So a challenge is not moderated by the EB, and it requires approval of the EB to be put into action. So a maximum time allowed for a challenge is a 3 minute. How do you raise a motion for the same? You can raise it by saying motion to challenge the delegate of, let's say, Japan over. You have to mention the topic area, which can be, let's say, the veto powers while reforming the Security Council for the time duration, which can be maximum of 3 minutes. So this is how you raise a challenge. I'll repeat once again. Challenge is basically you utilize when you want to discuss a particular subtopic or a country's policy or to solve any dispute between countries. Then you utilize a challenge. Remember, the maximum time allowed for a challenge is 3 minutes, and it's not moderated by the executive board. So, moving on, we have one for and one against. This is the second interesting rule. What this rule means is, let's say there's a disagreement inside the council whether delegates are not clear whether they want to support the working paper or a resolution, and they want to know both the sides before moving ahead with the voting. So one for one against, you can call it, wherein one person comes and speaks for 1 minute and another person comes and speaks for another minute. The first person who speaks is always the one who's supporting the side, and the second person is against that side. So, and maximum time allowed per person or per speaker is 1 minute. So, one for one against basically means that the committee cannot decide upon the particular topic. So, this is utilized to know both the sides of the agenda, and the maximum time allowed per speaker is 1 minute each. So, this is one for one against. However, one for one against can also be increased to 2 for 2 against. What is 2 for 2 against? It's exactly same as 1 for 1 against, but here 2 people will speak for the topic, 2 people will speak against the topic. So the way it goes about is this: first speaker speaks for 1 minute, that is for. Then the first against speaker speaks for 1 minute. Post that, you have second speaker who's supporting the side speak, and after that you have the second speaker who's against the side speak. So this is about one for one against and how it can be expanded to 2 for 2 against. The next thing that we have is something called question answer session. What is a question answer session? Let's say a council has lot of questions or queries from a delegate or a particular delegate or 2 or 3 delegates. Then at a time, 2 of the delegates can come on the dais and the entire council can ask them questions. I repeat, question answer session, as the name says, basically the council gets an opportunity to raise questions to the delegates. So when this happens in the question answer session, there is a maximum number of questions that can be asked. That is, the maximum number is 10 questions. Now all these 10 questions can be followed up by 2 more questions. So in question answer session, why do you need it? You basically want to clarify, or you have a couple of questions that you would like to ask to 1 or more delegates inside the council, but at a time only 2 delegates can come on the dais. And how do you raise this motion? You can raise it by saying motion to move into the question answer session with the delegate of, let's say, Germany for total time period, which can be maximum of 10 minutes, which needs to be same as the number of question. Then you have to mention the total number of question, which is maximum 10 questions. Okay, I hope you are clear with all these three rules. Now, post this, we have something else called a clause by clause voting. Now, what is a clause by clause voting? This basically means that you would like to discuss each and every clause in the resolution. But before moving on to this, there are two more important things which we will cover, and those are, firstly, we have something called presidential statement. What is a presidential statement? A delegate basically raises a presidential statement when a delegate want to express his or her stand on a particular issue or a particular topic. Presidential statement is very disruptive in nature, and it is compulsorily followed by two questions. And presidential statement means that the head of the state is present inside the council, hence it can be raised at any time during the debate. However, since it's such a disruptive motion, a maximum of 3 such presidential statements are allowed for the entire course of the debate. So, I'll repeat what is presidential statement once again. It basically means that the delegate would like to express his or her stand on a particular issue, and the head of the state is inside the council. And since it's a very disruptive motion, a maximum of 3 presidential statements are allowed for the entire course of the debate. Remember, a presidential statement is compulsorily followed by 2 questions. Moving on, the next thing that we have is called a joint statement. What is a joint statement? Basically, joint statement is a document wherein, let's say, there are 2 or more countries who would like to make an announcement inside the council regarding their views on the topic area. Now, a joint statement is always given in a written format, and for it to be announced inside the council, it needs to be first validated by the chairperson, and the chair has the right to invalidate the such statements, and it can be made at any time during the council. But remember, ideally it's used for a change in a country's policies, and it's made along with at least 2 countries or more who can come together. I hope you are very clear with the joint statement. Now, these were the things that we covered. Firstly, I'll repeat all those 5 points very briefly to you again. First, we have is the challenge. In challenge, the maximum time allowed is 3 minutes, and it's utilized for discussing a particular subtopic or your country's policies. Next, we have is 1 for 1 against, which basically is utilized to know about both the sides of the topic area before, for example, a voting is done. Post that, we have a question answer session which can be raised when the council has a lot of questions to 1 or more delegates present inside the council. Next we have is a presidential statement, which basically means the head of the state is inside the council, and the same can be utilized to share or express the delegates' opinions. And there is no maximum time limit on presidential statement. However, time limit can be imposed by the executive board, and a maximum of 3 such statements are allowed for the entire course of the debate. Next we have is a joint statement. What is a joint statement? In joint statement, two or more countries can come together and they can share their ideas on the topic area. Ideally, it's utilized for changing countries' policies, and remember, it's in a written format and it needs to be validated by the executive board before its announcement. Now, these are all the rules that you utilize during normal format debate. However, in case you have something called the emergency debate or debate wherein there's a crisis, now commonly called the crisis situation. In the crisis situation, and IIMUN, you have a couple of rules that you have to follow. A crisis or the emergency should not be there inside the council for more than 3 hours, and there are no updates permitted. But however, the first rule that we have is the quorum for the crisis. Now the quorum for the crisis is a little bit different than the quorum for the normal debate. That is, the quorum for crisis is the 1/5 of the member countries who are involved in the issue need to be present. Now let's say there are 30 countries inside the council and the crisis deals with, let's say, 5 countries. Then the 1/5 of the member countries who are involved, that is 1/5 of the 5 delegates, at least one out of those 5 countries should be present in those 30 delegates to have the emergency debate. That's the first. Next we have is something called speakers. Now, when recognizing the speakers in emergency situation, the chairperson recognizes the 5 speakers maximum who have to come and speak. Now, remember, these 5 speakers are not a part of a speakers list because there is no speakers list inside the emergency, but these 5 speakers have compulsory yield. Now, the order and the speaker to speak is decided by the executive board, and they will speak for a minute each. Next up, we have a moderated caucus. Everything remains same for a moderated caucus in the emergency debate. However, the agenda or the topic for the moderated caucus is decided by the executive board. Now, there's a maximum number of moderated caucus that can be raised during an emergency, and that number is 5 moderated caucus. You cannot have anything more than 5 moderated caucus in an emergency. Another rule that we have in emergency is all the rules except the point of personal privilege is still valid. The point of personal privilege is not allowed during the ongoing of the emergency. Also, during the emergency, the point of information's mandate extends to questions as well, wherein the delegates can ask questions utilizing the same. Next up, we have an unmoderated caucus. In this unmoderated caucus, there's only one unmoderated caucus allowed, and this unmoderated caucus is utilized for drafting the declaration. Now, what is a declaration? Now, if you remember, there, as I said before, there are 3 different types of paperwork. And the third type, the first was working paper, second was resolution, the third was declaration. Now, declaration is a combination of a working paper and resolution. Since there is only maximum 1 unmoderated caucus allowed during emergency debate, we have a combination of both the working papers and resolution, and since it's a crisis, we need to have a solution very quickly. Hence, a declaration is made. What's the format of a declaration? It's in the same prescribed format as a resolution, and it has the same requisites, such as it requires 1 author and 3 signatories, and Also, remember, a declaration is very similar to a resolution. I hope you're clear with what happens in an emergency debate. Now, in an emergency debate, these are the few points that you have to consider. And I think with this, we have covered how and what are the points or the rules that we require in the council to begin with the proceedings. For example, let's say you are discussing a working paper. So you can utilize the important points that I mentioned. For example, you can discuss the working paper using either, let's say, a question answer session, or you can have a one for one against, or you can have a challenge. Similarly, you can discuss the resolution using either one of the rules mentioned and explained to you in the ROP. I hope you guys are clear. If you have any queries, you can contact us. And with this, we come to an end of this session. Thank you so much.